Just as a correction, I don't think the show in Lottie Dottie came out in 1984. That may have been around 1986. Yeah, 1986 is when that came out, or 1987, somewhere around there. My dates are not correct, but you know the records that I'm talking about. Maybe the years are off, but I'm not trying to be a complete statistical historian here, but I know what I'm talking about. So, on from that, my cousin, whose name was Richard Spencer, he started getting with his cousin on his father's side. His name was Roy Spencer. Roy Spencer was a DJ, and he was in some type of record pool where once we went over Roy's house, he had a great collection of records. He had all of the Tommy Boy singles that I guess were dispersed through record pool. He had all of the Def Jam records, the Tila Rock Def Jam record, and then the first single, I Need a Beat from Def Jam. And so Roy was influential in getting Richard to get into the DJing aspect of it. And Richard's mom, of course, bought him 2 turntables, not Technique 1200s, but some Technique turntables. They weren't 1200s, but they were some little flimsy Technique turntables, a mixer, 2 speakers, and a microphone, of course. So from there, it was the influence of Roy and Richard getting different singles records and mixing those records and making tapes and such. And from there is when I started really recording records from my cousin Richard, who was influenced by his cousin Roy. And I was just kind of in the center of their DJing back and forth and their camaraderie as family and as hip-hop DJs in our little small town of Warren, Ohio. I can't really recall any great records during that period of time, but those are some great times. So I guess from that point I can kind of jump to really my first memorable album during that time. I didn't necessarily record this album at the time or have it recorded, but since I was in the crew with Richard and Roy and they had these albums, of course I listened to the album and I knew the songs. And then Roy and Richard, they started throwing these house parties in the basement, and all of the kids would come. You would pay 50 cents to get in and a quarter for a soda if you wanted it. And then they would DJ and they would play all of these great records. And when I think about it, like the album that I'm talking about is LLCOOLJ Radio, which was LLCOOLJ's first album on Def Jam. From that album, let's see, we played Rock the Bells, of course. We played At the Party, Dear Yvette, of course. And if I remember correctly, we also played You Can't Dance from that record. Or maybe I just like You Can't Dance, but that was a great, terrific album. LL's first showing on Def Jam and his first album as a professional MC was a great album, and we really loved that album. That was an album that I can remember as one of my first really hip-hop albums that I really listened to and that I thought was a great album. Not to go into too much depth about it, but that was a really great album. So from then, I started buying cheap, like $1 for 3 cassettes at Woolworth's in the mall. And then I started taping my cousin Richard's albums. So this began with me taping albums around the year of 1985, 1986. So I have all of these cheap, flimsy tapes. I still have my tapes. I never throw away any music unless the tape just ripped up. And even my stepfather showed me a way to cure that, where you just cut the tape and paste some Scotch tape on it and put it all back together. So I still have flimsy tapes that I can't even play anymore because they're so cheap. But from those tapes, it was like right around the time when I wouldn't say right around that time, but I know an album that I have on tape is like Just Ice, his first album with LaToya. What other albums? LLCOOLJ's Def Jam, his second album, Bigger and Deffer. I have that album on a little cheap, flimsy tape. UTFO's album, I can't even remember any songs off of it, but the song with Bad Luck Barry, yeah, that album with Bad Luck Barry, I had that on tape. I listened to that album a lot. what other album? The Fat Boys. Yeah, I was really into the Fat Boys. I was into the Fat Boys since they first came out, and that was like in 1984 when I was in the 6th grade when their first album, Fat Boys, came out, and In Jail and the beatbox. I was a really great beatboxer. Like I could, at any moment, even now, I could just bust out half of a, because they had the beatbox 1, then they had beatbox 2, and then they had beatbox 3. And it may have even had beatbox 4. But I know for beatbox 1, like I could beatbox that whole song. So I was known around the neighborhood for beatboxing. And at times, I would beatbox and somebody else would like rap the song. And we would kind of be like an unofficial crew of like a Fat Boys beatbox song crew. He's like, hey, you go outside, hey, bust out that song. And I bust out the beatbox. So I was really a great beatboxer at the time, and I was really into that. And another great beatbox record, an album that I taped from my cousin. I can remember my cousin Richard coming over to my house. We lived in the projects in Warren, Ohio, the Howland homes. So he comes over one night and he says, I got this really great record, man, and it's like it's beatboxing and it's Reddy Roxy and the Fresh Prince, and he's beatboxing underwater and he's doing this and he's doing that with the beatbox. It's like, yeah, I've never heard anything like it before. He was like really fascinated by this Reddy Roxy album, a record with Jazzy Jeff and Reddy Roxy. It was like when we rock the house, there is no doubt that me and Reddy C will turn it out. Is no doubt. Turn it out. Jazzy Jeff. Double Def. That's right, we are the best. Everywhere we go, everybody want to know. Well, if you never heard the record, if you heard the record, you know what I'm talking about. But I knew the whole beatbox to that record also. Actually, a funny story is my friend, may he rest in peace, DeWitt Marsh, and my other friend, Aaron Walker, we were all in the same grade. We all were in the kindergarten together. So at this time, we were in the 8th grade together. And we used to perform that record coming home from school every day on the bus. And I did the beatbox, and Aaron also did a part of the beatbox. Or we beatboxed together, and DeWitt, he used to rap the song. And we did this song every day coming home on the bus. So we had signed up to do a talent show. We auditioned for a talent show to do the song. We got through the audition pretty well. But when it was time to do the show at school, for some reason we kept looking at each other and cracking up. We couldn't get through the song. We just laughed on the stage, and we didn't get booed off, but we just gave up and left the stage. I guess we were laughing out of nervousness or whatever, but we were laughing and we couldn't perform the song. But we performed that song perfectly every day going home on the bus. Every day. I was the beatbox, Aaron was the beatbox, and DeWitt would sing the rap. And we performed that whole entire song every day to perfection. So once we blew that talent show performance at school, this nice lady named Miss Edwards, she was really fond of DeWitt and maybe even fond of Aaron Walker as well. She got us a gig performing at the YMCA, performing for some kids. And I guess not to waste our talent of putting together this routine and never getting to perform it for anybody, she got us a gig at the YMCA performing for kids. So it was like one Saturday morning, she came and picked us all up, and we went and we performed the song. And fortunately, that time, we actually got through the record. So that was another influential, actually that album of the Fresh Prince, that was a really great album. I had that album on tape, but that tape had gotten destroyed, sad to say. And I've never collected that album since. But the Fresh Prince, a.k.a. Will Smith, he was a pretty good rapper. He liked to use big vocabulary words in his lyrics at the time. And he had some funky production. And when they did the beatbox songs, those were funky. And of course, Jazzy Jeff was a great DJ. He was like one of the first DJs to do the Transformer scratch. So that was a very big thing at the time. My cousin Richard and Roy were trying to perfect the Transformer scratch. And, you know, occasionally I would get on the turntables and try to do a little of this and that. But I was never really too much of a turntablist. I was more of a beatbox guy and just paying attention to the beats of the records. If your record didn't have a nice beat on it, it wasn't really getting played or getting liked or getting mentioned by me as a hot record. So yeah, those were some great times. Also recording like mini records on little cheap cassette tapes. Like I said, Just Ice, Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince, the Fat Boys albums that came out at the time. I had those on little cheap flimsy tapes. And then like singles were coming very big at the time also. So you had at this time starting to come was the Eric B and Rakim singles. You had the Sweet Tea singles. Sweet Tea, she had like 3 singles, and her album just never dropped. It actually dropped 3 years later after her first single, but she had very great singles. And Hurry, My Headphones Are Not Loud Enough. It's like that, y'all, that, y'all. That was a great single. And what else? Sweet Tea, Jazzy Joyce on the wheels, Jazzy Joyce getting better, Jazzy Joyce chilling out in that 86 Jetta. I forget the name of that song, but that was another great single by It's My Beat. Yeah, It's My Beat was the name of it. So that was another great single that came out at the time. There were some other singles by like the group Whistle. They had a single called Listen Up that I would put on the end of my tape and really listen to a lot. Who else I can think of? An influential crew that had a great single record that came out at that time. Can't really think of any too specific, but yeah, those are some great times. But I still can't count this as the time of me actually getting into the hip hop. That actually came a little bit later. I'll talk about that on my next segment.